He didn't scream. He didn't fight back. When the security guard grabbed 17-year-old Vian by the collar of his vintage hoodie, the boy just checked his watch and whispered, "You are making a mistake that will cost this airline $40 million in the next hour." They laughed at him. Patricia Cromwell, the woman clutching her pearls in the corner, smirked as they dragged him out of the Diamond Elite Lounge like a common criminal. 10 minutes later, that smirk vanished when the blast doors slammed shut. The alarms screamed and a SWAT team surrounded her luggage. This isn't just a story about prejudice. It's a masterclass in why you never judge a book by its cover, especially when that book has the power to shut down JFK International Airport. The air inside the Diamond Elite Lounge at JFK Terminal 4 smelled of expensive espresso leather polish and quiet entitlement. It was a sanctuary for the 1%, a place where the noise of the general public was filtered out by frosted glass and soundproof walls. Vian casually adjusted the strap of his battered navy blue backpack. He was 17, black and wearing a grey oversized hoodie that looked like it had seen better days, paired with loose joggers and scuffed sneakers. To the untrained eye, he looked like a kid who had gotten lost on his way to the food court. To a trained eye, specifically one that knew streetwear fashion, the hoodie was a limited-run Japanese designer piece worth $1,200, and the sneakers were vintage prototypes. But Patricia Cromwell did not have a trained eye. She had a suspicious eye. Patricia sat in a high-backed velvet armchair, nursing a glass of Chardonnay at 10:00 a.m. She was in her late 50s, wearing a tweed blazer that cost more than most people's cars, and she watched the lounge entrance like a hawk guarding a nest. She saw Vian walk in, scan his digital boarding pass at the automated kiosk, and breeze through the glass gates. The gates beeped green, a soft, welcoming chime. Patricia frowned. She set her glass down with a sharp clink. Vian didn't notice her. He was exhausted. He had been up for 3 days straight coding for a hackathon in Brooklyn and was now heading back to San Francisco. All he wanted was a bottle of sparkling water, a corner, to charge his proprietary server deck, and silence. He walked over to the complimentary buffet, grabbed a green apple and a bottle of Pellegrino, and moved toward the quiet section at the back of the lounge. As he passed Patricia's table, she cleared her throat. It was a loud, theatrical sound, like a zipper being ripped open. Vian paused, pulling his noise-cancelling headphones down around his neck. "Excuse me, the food court is downstairs," Patricia said, not looking at him but rather inspecting her manicured fingernails. Her tone was flat factual and dripping with ice. Vian blinked, confused. "I know. I'm just grabbing a seat." "This is the Diamond Lounge," she said, finally turning to face him. Her eyes swept over his hoodie, his messy hair, and his backpack. "It's for members and first-class passengers only. The cleaning staff entrance is around the back if you're looking for the break room." Vian sighed. It was too early for this. "I'm not staff, ma'am. I'm flying first." Patricia let out a sharp, incredulous laugh. She looked around the lounge, trying to make eye contact with other passengers to share the joke. A businessman across the aisle looked up from his iPad, frowned, and went back to reading. "Don't lie to me," Patricia snapped, her voice rising. "I've been flying with this airline for 20 years. I know who belongs here. You probably slipped in when the gate was open behind someone else. Now be a good boy and leave before I have to call someone." Vian adjusted his grip on his water. "I scanned my pass. The gate opened. If you have an issue with security, take it up with them. But leave me alone." He turned to walk away. That was his mistake. Turning his back on Patricia Cromwell was an insult she could not abide. "Hey!" she shouted, standing up. The lounge went silent. "I am talking to you. You do not to walk away from me." Vian kept walking. He found an empty leather recliner near the window, sat down, and placed his backpack carefully between his legs. He put his headphones back on. Patricia was vibrating with rage. She marched over to the concierge desk, where a young man named Gary was typing furiously on a computer. Gary was the lounge manager, a man who hated confrontation, but loved the feeling of authority. "Gary," Patricia hissed, leaning over the marble counter. "Mrs. Cromwell," Gary said, putting on his customer service smile. "Is everything all right? Can I get you a refill?" "No, you cannot get me a refill. You can do your job." She pointed a trembling finger toward the back of the lounge. "There is a teenager in the quiet section. He's wearing street clothes. He stole food from the buffet, and he was incredibly aggressive when I asked him to leave." Gary's eyes widened. "Aggressive? He threatened me," she lied effortlessly. "He said if I didn't shut up, he'd make me shut up. I don't feel safe, Gary. And frankly, with the membership fees I pay, I shouldn't have to look at that while I'm trying to relax." Gary looked at the monitors. "Did he scan in?" "He tailgated behind that pilot who just walked in," Patricia insisted. "I saw it with my own eyes. Are you going to remove him, or do I need to call the corporate office and tell them that Gary lets dangerous people harass Diamond members?" Gary paled. He knew Mrs. Cromwell. She was a titanium tear flyer. One email from her could end his career. He swallowed hard, straightened his tie, and stepped out from behind the desk. "I'll handle it immediately, Mrs. Cromwell." Gary marched across the lounge, his shoes clicking sharply on the polished floor. Patricia followed a few steps behind, a triumphant smirk playing on her lips. She pulled out her phone and started recording just in case she needed evidence for the police. Vian had his eyes closed, listening to a lofi hip-hop playlist, trying to lower his heart rate. He sensed the shadow over him before he felt the tap on his shoulder. He opened his eyes. Gary was looming over him, arms crossed. "Sir, I need to see your boarding pass," Gary said loudly. Vian pulled his headphones down again. "I scanned it at the door." "I need to see it now," Gary demanded. "And I need to see ID." "Is there a problem?" Vian asked, keeping his voice calm. He reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. The screen was cracked, another detail Patricia had noted with disdain, but the QR code was valid. Gary glanced at the phone. It read Vian T. Sterling, Seat 1A. SFO. Gary paused. Seat 1A was usually reserved for high-profile VIPs or air marshals. He looked at the kid. There was no way this kid in a hoodie was sitting in 1A. It had to be a faked screenshot. Kids these days could Photoshop anything. "This is a screenshot," Gary scoffed. "Refresh the app." "The Wi-Fi in here is spotty," Vian said. "Look, man, I'm tired. I have a valid ticket. The lady over there," he nodded toward Patricia, who was filming him, "has been harassing me since I walked in. Can you check your system?" "Don't you dare accuse me," Patricia shouted from behind Gary. "He's lying, Gary. He's a squatter. Look at his bags. It's filthy." Gary felt the pressure. He didn't want to walk all the way back to the desk to verify the name. He wanted this problem gone so Mrs. Cromwell would stop yelling. "Sir, I'm going to ask you to leave," Gary said. "We have a dress code." "Since when?" Vian asked. "Half the guys in here are wearing shorts." "Since I said so," Gary snapped. "You are disrupting the peace. You are aggressive toward our guests. You are trespassing." "I am not trespassing," Vian said, his voice hardening. He stood up. He was taller than Gary, which only made the manager feel more insecure. I paid $7,000 for this ticket. Bullshit, Patricia yelled. Get him out, Gary, call the police. Sit down or leave, Gary yelled. I'm not leaving until my flight boards, Vian said firmly. He reached down to grab his backpack. He's reaching for a weapon, Patricia shrieked. The reaction was instantaneous. 2 airport police officers who had been grabbing coffee near the entrance heard the scream and came running. Back away, Officer Miller shouted, his hand resting on his holster. Hands where I can see them. Vian froze. He slowly raised his hands. I'm just grabbing my bag. It has sensitive equipment in it. Step away from the bag, Miller commanded. Officer, this boy attacked me. Patricia lied, stepping forward with fake tears welling up. He's been threatening everyone. He said he has something in that bag to blow this place up. Vian's eyes went wide. I never said that she's lying. He's a threat, Gary added, wanting to cover his own back. He refused to show ID and became belligerent. Officer Miller didn't ask questions. In the post-9/11 world of airport security, the word blow triggers a protocol that overrides logic. Miller and his partner, Officer Davis, lunged forward. They grabbed Vian. One grabbed his left arm, the other his right. Hey, watch the arm. Vian winced. I'm not resisting. They spun him around and slammed him face first into the leather recliner. The lounge guests gasped. Some pulled out phones to record. Stop! Vian yelled, his face pressed against the leather. You don't understand. My backpack, do not drop it. It's a hypersensitive L4 prototype. If it hits the ground hard, it triggers a fail-safe. Shut up, Officer Davis grunted, clicking handcuffs onto Vian's wrists. Gary, feeling emboldened, reached down and grabbed the navy blue backpack. I'll get rid of this. Don't touch it, Vian pleaded, panic finally entering his voice. It's not a bomb, but it has a magnetic lock. If you jostle it, it emits a signal that will… Yeah, save it for the judge. Gary sneered. He didn't just pick it up. He swung it. He tossed the backpack over the back of the sofa toward the walkway so the officers could grab it later. The backpack sailed through the air for a brief second. It landed on the hard marble floor with a sickening crack and a heavy thud. For 2 seconds, nothing happened. Vian pinned to the chair, closed his eyes, and let out a long, defeated breath. You idiots, he whispered. You just bricked the terminal. Get him up, Miller said, hauling Vian to his feet. Patricia was beaming. She pointed her phone right in Vian's face. Say goodbye to first class, thug. Vian looked at her, then at Gary, then at the officers. His expression had shifted from panic to a cold, hard resolve. I want it on record, Vian said, clearly staring into Patricia's camera lens, that at 10:14 a.m., despite my warnings, lounge manager Gary and Officer Miller forcibly separated me from my property and damaged a Class 1 government asset. My name is Vian Sterling. My father is Director Harrison Sterling of the Department of Homeland Security, and you have exactly 3 minutes before the National Guard locks this building down. Gary rolled his eyes. Yeah, and my dad is the Tooth Fairy. Move it. They began to drag him toward the exit. Patricia laughed, waving a manicured hand. Bye-bye. Then a sound cut through the lounge. It wasn't an explosion. It was a low, vibrating hum coming from the backpack on the floor. It sounded like a massive power transformer powering up. Zizzy. Thrum. Suddenly, the lights in the lounge flickered. The departure screens on the wall glitched, turned static grey, and then went black. Gary's computer monitor behind the desk sparked and died. Every cell phone in the room, including Patricia's, cut out. The recording stopped. "What is that?" Patricia asked, tapping her dead screen. "My phone died." "Mine too," Officer Miller said, looking at his radio. He clicked the button. "Dispatch, dispatch, come in." Static. "I told you," Vian said, his voice calm amidst the sudden confusion. "The backpack contains a portable EMP shielding unit for transporting classified servers. When you dropped it, you cracked the containment. It just went into emergency venting mode. It's jamming every electronic signal within a half-mile radius." Gary looked at the backpack. A small red LED light was pulsing on the side of it. "And," Vian added, "that pulse just triggered the airport's automated terror response system. Look outside." They looked out the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the tarmac. The jet bridges had stopped moving. The baggage carts were frozen, and racing across the tarmac were 4 black SUVs with flashing blue lights, followed by 2 armored trucks. Inside the terminal, the emergency sirens began to wail. But they weren't the normal fire alarms. This was the Code Zero alarm. A robotic voice echoed over the intercom, powered by the emergency backup generator. "Terminal breach detected. Electromagnetic anomaly. Lockdown initiated. No one leaves. No one enters. Remain where you are." Massive steel shutters began to descend over the lounge windows and the main exit doors. "You trapped us in here," Patricia whispered, horror dawning on her face. "No, Patricia," Vian said, finally shaking off the officer's grip as the stunned cop let go. "You trapped yourself in here with me. And my dad. He's probably about 5 minutes out. And he hates it when I miss dinner." The Diamond Elite Lounge had transformed from a haven of luxury into a high-end prison cell. The blast door's massive sheets of reinforced steel, usually hidden within the ceiling panels, had slammed down, sealing the panoramic windows and the main entrance. The emergency lighting bathed the room in a sickly, pulsing red glow. The silence was the worst part. The hum of the refrigerator, the soft jazz music, the click of laptops. It was all gone. The EMP burst from Vian's damaged backpack had fried every circuit that wasn't hardened against military-grade interference. Patricia Cromwell was the first to break the silence. She rushed to the steel blast door where the glass entrance used to be and pounded on it with her fists. "Open up!" she screamed, her voice cracking. "I am a titanium member. You cannot lock me in here. I have a lunch reservation in San Francisco." Gary, the manager, was huddled behind his desk, frantically pressing the power button on his landline phone. "Dead," he muttered, sweat beading on his forehead. "The landline is dead. My cell is dead. The computer won't even turn on." Officer Miller and Officer Davis looked at each other with growing dread. They were airport police used to dealing with drunks or lost luggage. They weren't trained for a Code Zero lockdown. Miller tried his radio again. "Command, this is Miller. We have a situation in the Diamond Lounge. Unidentified device activation. Do you copy?" Silence. Just the hiss of static. Vian was still sitting in the leather chair where they had shoved him. He was rubbing his wrists where the handcuffs had pinched the skin. He looked remarkably calm for a teenager who had just shut down one of the busiest terminals in the world. He leaned forward and picked up the backpack. The red light on the side was blinking faster now. "Don't touch that!" Gary shrieked, pointing a trembling finger. "You've done enough. I'm trying to stop the cycle." Vian said, his voice tired. The impact cracked the shielding on the qubit processor. It's leaking interference. If I don't engage, the manual kill switch inside the range will expand. Right now, it's just this terminal. In 10 minutes, it'll be the air traffic control tower. If that happens, planes in the air go blind. Do you want that on your conscience, Gary? Gary's mouth opened and closed like a fish. He looked at the officers. Shoot him, or stop him. Let him work, Officer Miller said, his voice low. The gravity of the situation was sinking in. He looked at the boy, really looked at him for the first time. The expensive hoodie, the confidence, the specific technical language. Miller felt a knot form in his stomach. We messed up. You're letting the terrorist touch the bomb? Patricia gasped, turning away from the door. She marched over to the officers. Arrest him. Tackle him again. He's bluffing. Lady, shut up, Miller snapped. The sudden aggression from the officer made Patricia recoil. If he can turn the lights back on, let him do it. Vian unzipped the bag. Inside, amidst tangled wires and cooling fans, sat a sleek silver-black box stamped with a logo, Palantir Technologies, property of U.S. government. Patricia squinted at the logo. Palantir. What is that? Some video game brand? Vian didn't look up as his fingers flew over a small manual keypad built into the device. Palantir is a defense contractor, Mrs. Cromwell. They build software for the CIA, the FBI, and the Department of Homeland Security. This specific unit is a black box penetration testing server. I was hired to fly it to Silicon Valley to test the firewall of the new NSA data center. He pressed a final sequence of keys. Enter, Shift, Escape. The humming noise stopped. The red light turned solid blue. A second later, the emergency red lights in the room flickered off and the standard warm yellow lighting buzzed back on. The hum of the refrigerator returned. He fixed it. Gary breathed, slumping against the counter. Thank God. Okay, it's over. We can just explain this as a malfunction. Vian laughed. It was a dark, humorless sound. Oh, Gary, the EMP is off, but the lockdown, that's automatic. You don't just turn off a terror response. You triggered a level 5 breach. The signal is gone, but the cavalry is already here. As if on cue, a loud, booming voice echoed from the other side of the steel blast doors. It was amplified by a megaphone. This is the FBI hostage rescue team. We have the perimeter surrounded. All occupants lie on the floor with your hands on your heads. Failure to comply will be met with lethal force. Patricia's face went white. Hostage rescue. They think I'm the hostage, Vian said, leaning back in the chair and crossing his legs. Or they think you've taken the terminal. Either way, they aren't coming in to serve drinks. This is ridiculous. Patricia straightened her blazer, her arrogance battling her fear. I will speak to the manager of the FBI. I am the victim here. Get on the floor, ma'am, Officer Davis hissed, dropping to his knees and pulling Gary down with him. I will not, Patricia scoffed. I am wearing white linen pants. Suddenly, sparks flew from the corners of the blast door. Zzzz, too. The smell of burning metal filled the air. They were cutting through the hinges. Get down, Vian yelled, diving behind the leather armchair. Patricia stood frozen in the center of the room, clutching her pearls, watching as the steel door was blown inward with a deafening boom. Smoke filled the room. Through the haze, 12 figures in heavy tactical gear, night vision goggles and assault rifles swarmed into the lounge. Laser sights, dozens of red dots danced through the smoke, scanning for threats. 3 red dots settled directly on Patricia's chest. Freeze, get down now! Patricia Cromwell, for the first time in her life, did exactly what she was told. She dropped to her knees, screaming, "Don't shoot! He did it! The black kid did it!" The chaos lasted for 30 seconds. The tactical team moved with fluid, terrifying precision. Gary was zip-tied before he could blink. Officers Miller and Davis were disarmed and shoved against the wall, treated just like the suspects they were guarding. Patricia was weeping loudly, face pressed into the carpet, ruining her makeup. "Clear left. Clear right. Target secure. Looking for the asset. Where is the asset?" One of the soldiers, a massive man with a skull patch on his vest, approached the leather armchair where Vian was sitting with his hands raised. The soldier lowered his rifle. "Vian?" the soldier asked, his voice distorted by the mask. "Hey, Uncle Rick," Vian said dryly. The soldier ripped off his mask, revealing the face of Rick Martinez, the head of the DHS protective detail. He sighed, looking at the teenager. "Your dad is going to have an aneurysm, kid." "I told them," Vian said, nodding toward the trembling group on the floor. "I told them to call him. They smashed the unit, Rick. They bricked the prototype." Rick winced. "The $40 million prototype, that's the one." Rick turned to his comms unit. "Control, this is Alpha 1. Asset is secure, unharmed. The device is compromised. Bring him in." The soldiers parted, forming a corridor from the shattered entrance of the lounge. The smoke began to clear. Walking through the destruction was not a soldier. It was a man in a sharp, navy blue Italian suit. He was tall, black, with graying hair cut close, and glasses that framed eyes burning with a cold, terrifying intelligence. Harrison Sterling, Director of the Department of Homeland Security. He walked into the lounge with the air of a man who owned the very ground he stepped on. He didn't look at the soldiers. He didn't look at the broken door. He walked straight to Vian. "You hurt?" Harrison asked, his voice quiet. "Bruised wrists. Maybe a rib." "They slammed me pretty hard," Vian said, standing up. Harrison nodded. He reached out and squeezed his son's shoulder. Then slowly, he turned around to face the room. The room fell deadly silent. Even Patricia stopped crying. She looked up, squinting at the man. She recognized him, not from the airport, but from the news. CNN. The White House briefings. "Oh my God," she whispered. Harrison Sterling walked over to where Gary Miller Davis and Patricia were zip-tied on the floor. He crouched down, balancing effortlessly on the balls of his expensive dress shoes. He looked at Officer Miller first. "You're Miller?" Harrison asked. Yes, sir," Miller stammered. "My son tells me he identified himself. He tells me he warned you about the device. Is that true?" He was resisting, sir. We followed protocol," Miller said, though his voice lacked conviction. "Protocol," Harrison repeated, tasting the word. "Does protocol involve assaulting a minor who has already cleared TSA screening? Does protocol involve destroying federal property?" Harrison stood up and walked over to Gary. Gary was shaking so hard, his teeth were chattering. "And you," Harrison said, looking at Gary's name tag. "Gary. The manager." She told me," Gary stammered, nodding frantically toward Patricia. "Mrs. Cromwell. She said he was a threat. She said he stole. I was trying to protect the guests." Harrison turned his gaze to Patricia. She was trying to muster her dignity, sitting up on her knees. "You must be Mrs. Cromwell," Harrison said. His tone was polite, which made it infinitely more terrifying. "I am a victim here," Patricia blurted out. "That boy, your son, was dressed like a thug. He didn't belong here. I have been a loyal customer of this airline for 20 years, and I demanded he leave. He was aggressive. Harrison stared at her. He didn't blink. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a tablet that an aide had just handed him. "Mrs. Cromwell," Harrison said, tapping the screen. "We pulled the lounge security footage 5 minutes ago. I watched it in the command truck." Patricia's face crumbled. "I saw my son enter quietly." Harrison narrated, his voice hardening. "I saw him get water. I saw you approach him. I saw you screaming at him while he sat in a chair. And then I saw you lie to these officers claiming he had a bomb." I thought... No, you didn't think." Harrison interrupted, his voice finally rising, echoing off the walls. "You saw a young black man in a hoodie in your space, and you decided he didn't belong. You weaponized the police against him." Harrison turned to the lead FBI agent. "Agent, what is the federal penalty for filing a false report of terrorism, resulting in the shutdown of a major transportation hub?" The agent stepped forward. "Under the Patriot Act, Section 802, roughly 20 years in federal prison, sir, plus restitution for the economic damages." Patricia gasped. 20 years. "The airport has been shut down for 45 minutes, Harrison said, checking his watch. "Fuel costs diverted flights, grounded cargo. The bill is currently sitting at around $12 million. And we haven't even factored in the $40 million for the device you ordered Gary to destroy." Harrison leaned in close to Patricia's face. "You wanted him out of your VIP lounge. Mrs. Cromwell, congratulations. You're leaving, but you aren't going to San Francisco. You're going to a holding cell at a federal black site until we sort this mess out. You can't do this," Patricia screamed as 2 agents hauled her up by her arms. "I know people. My husband is a lawyer." Harrison smiled, a cold, shark-like smile. "Good. Tell him to bring his best suit. He's going to need it." He turned to Gary. "And Gary, the airline CEO is on line 1. He wants to know why his lounge manager just cost the company a quarterly profit. I'd start updating your resume, but frankly you won't need one where you're going." As the agents began to drag them away, Vian walked up next to his dad. "A bit dramatic with the black site comment, Dad," Vian muttered. "She doesn't know that," Harrison winked. "But the lawsuit, that's going to be very, very real." Just as they were about to leave, Officer Miller spoke up. "Director Sterling, does this mean... Are we fired?" Harrison stopped. He looked at the 2 cops. They looked terrified, but unlike Patricia and Gary, there was genuine remorse in their eyes. They had been manipulated by a Lara, but they had also been too quick to judge. "That depends," Harrison said. "My son has a flight to catch, but his server is destroyed. He needs a secure way to transport the backup hard drive to San Francisco immediately." Harrison looked at Vian. Vian shrugged. "I mean, I could take the hard drive, but I need an escort." Harrison looked back at Miller. "You 2 are going to escort my son, personally. You will carry his bags. You will ensure he gets water. You will stand guard outside the bathroom if he needs to go. You will treat him with the respect you should have shown him an hour ago. And if he has a single complaint when he lands, then you're fired." Miller swallowed hard. "Yes, sir. Thank you, sir." "Don't thank me," Harrison said, turning to walk out. "Thank the kid you just assaulted." The flight to San Francisco was the most awkward 6 hours of Officer Miller's life. Usually, when police escort a passenger, the passenger is in handcuffs, sitting in the back row, heads down. This was the opposite. Vian sat in seat 1A, the very seat Patricia had claimed he stole. He was sipping a freshly poured cranberry juice, his legs stretched out, watching a movie on the in-flight screen. Officer Miller and Officer Davis sat in 1B and 2A stiff as boards. Their weapons had been checked into the cockpit lockbox per regulations, so they felt naked and exposed. Every time a flight attendant walked by, she gave them a dirty look. The airline staff had already been briefed on what happened in the lounge. They knew these two were the ones who had manhandled the VIP guest. "Officer Miller," Vian asked, pausing his movie. Miller jumped. "Yes, sir, Mr. Sterling. Can you grab my laptop from the overhead bin? I want to do some coding." "Right away." Miller unbuckled, stood up, and carefully retrieved the replacement laptop Vian's father had provided. He handed it over with two hands like he was presenting a sacred artifact. "Thanks," Vian said. "Oh, and Davis," Officer Davis perked up. "Yes, you still have my old headphones in your pocket, the ones you confiscated." Davis turned beet red. He fished the crushed headphones out of his tactical vest. One of the ear cups was dangling by a wire. I'm sorry about this. We can pay for them." "Don't worry about it," Vian said, taking the broken headphones. "I'm going to frame them. A reminder." "A reminder of what?" Miller asked quietly. Vian looked at them, his eyes serious. "A reminder that authority without intelligence is just bullying. You guys saw a hoodie and saw a threat. You didn't see me. If my dad wasn't the director, I'd be in a cell right now, wouldn't I?" The officers didn't answer. They knew the answer was yes. They sat in silence for the rest of the flight, serving as the world's most overqualified personal assistants, contemplating the fact that their careers were hanging by a thread, held by a 17-year-old boy. Meanwhile, on the ground, the internet was waking up. A traveler in the lounge, a quiet teenager in the corner who had been ignored by everyone, had been live streaming on Twitch when the argument started. He had captured everything. Patricia's screaming, Gary's smugness, the officers slamming Vian, the backpack smash, and the arrival of the director. The clip was titled, "Karen Gets JFK Shut Down by Messing with the Wrong Kid." By the time Vian landed in San Francisco, the video had 14 million views. #terminal, Karen and #Vian Sterling were the top two trends on Twitter worldwide. 3 months later, the Federal District Court of New York was packed. It wasn't just local press. International media had camped out on the steps. This wasn't a normal assault case. This was United States of America v. Patricia Cromwell. Patricia sat at the defendant's table. She looked like a ghost of her former self. Her roots were showing she hadn't been able to afford her usual salon visits since her assets were frozen. Her husband, a corporate tax attorney, sat beside her, but he wasn't holding her hand. He was looking at his notes with a grim expression. The prosecutor was ruthless. He played the video on a massive screen for the jury. He played the security footage. He showed the itemized bill for the airport shutdown, $52,400,000. When Patricia took the stand, she tried the same tactics she used in the lounge. "I was afraid," she cried, dabbing her eyes with a tissue. He looked suspicious. "It's not a crime to be vigilant." "Mrs. Cromwell," the prosecutor said, adjusting his glasses. "You stated in the video, and I quote, 'he stole food.' We have receipts showing the airline invited him. You stated he threatened to blow up the airport. We have audio proving he never said that. You lied to federal agents to incite violence against a minor. That is not vigilance. That is weaponized prejudice." The jury didn't take long. Less than 2 hours. The judge, a stern woman named Justice Holloway, read the verdict. On the count of making false statements to federal officers, the jury finds the defendant, Patricia Cromwell, guilty. On the count of inciting a panic in a transportation facility, guilty. On the count of civil liability for destruction of government property, guilty. Patricia let out a sob, her head hitting the table. "Mrs. Cromwell, please stand," Justice Halloway said. Patricia stood trembling. "You treated a VIP lounge as your personal kingdom," the judge said. "You judged a young man by his clothes and his skin color, and in your arrogance, you caused a national security incident. You wanted to be treated like an elite fine. You will now be treated like a federal prisoner." The sentence was brutal. 8 years in federal prison. No parole for the first 5. Additionally, the judge ordered the liquidation of her assets, her home, her stocks, her cars, to pay back the Department of Homeland Security. She was leaving the courtroom not as a millionaire, but as a bankrupt inmate. As the bailiff handcuffed her, Patricia looked back at the gallery. She saw Vian sitting in the back row. He was wearing a suit today, looking sharp. He didn't smile. He didn't wave. He just watched her. Their eyes locked for a second. In that moment, Patricia realized the truth. She hadn't been destroyed by the system. She had destroyed herself. The wheels of justice grind slowly, but the wheels of capitalism grind fast. For Vian Sterling, the year following the JFK incident was a blur of vindication and velocity. The viral video hadn't just exposed prejudice, it had served as the world's most effective marketing campaign. Silicon Valley didn't care about his hoodie anymore. They cared about the code inside the backpack that had survived a SWAT team. He was no longer just the director's son. He was Vian Sterling, the founder of Aegis Systems, a cybersecurity firm specializing in hardened data transport. He was 19, a multimillionaire, and currently on his way to Tokyo to keynote the G7 summit on digital infrastructure. For Gary Wilson, however, the year had been a slow, agonizing slide into obscurity. The firing had been immediate. The airline didn't even let him clear out his desk. Security had escorted him to the curb, handing him a cardboard box containing a stapler, a photo of his cat, and a termination letter citing gross misconduct and reputational damage. But the firing was just the beginning. Gary had tried to bounce back. He had 20 years of experience in hospitality. He knew how to curate wine lists, how to manage high-net-worth clients, how to run a room. 2 weeks after the incident, he sat in an interview for a floor manager position at a mid-tier hotel in downtown San Francisco. The interview was going well until the HR director, a young woman with an iPad, frowned. "Gary Wilson," she muttered, typing his name into the search bar. Her eyes widened. She tapped the screen, turning it towards him. "Is this you?" It was a still image from the viral video. Gary's face twisted in a sneer, pointing a finger at Vian. The caption read, "The moment middle management destroyed a terminal." That was a misunderstanding. Gary stammered, his palms sweating. "I was following protocol. The video is edited." "Mr. Wilson," she said, standing up and closing the file. "We pride ourselves on inclusivity. I think we're done here." That scene played out 5 more times, then 10. The hospitality industry is a small world, and Gary was radioactive. He lost his apartment in the Marina district. He sold his Audi. He moved into a basement studio in Daly City that smelled of damp carpet and regret. By the time the 1-year anniversary of the incident rolled around, Gary had stopped applying for management jobs. He needed rent money. He needed to eat. He swallowed the last shred of his pride and took the only job that didn't run a background check on his internet fame, a graveyard shift cashier position at a fast food pretzel franchise inside SFO's international terminal. It was a cruel irony that the universe had placed him back at the scene of the crime, or at least a similar crime scene. But this time, he wasn't behind the marble counter of the Diamond Lounge, sipping espresso and judging people's shoes. He was standing behind a grease-stained register, wearing a polyester uniform that was 2 sizes too big, and a hairnet that itched. The date was October 14th. The terminal was bustling. Gary was exhausted. He had been on his feet for 7 hours. The air around the kiosk smelled of artificial butter and burnt dough. His back ached. "Next," Gary droned, not looking up, looking. He wiped the counter with a rag that had seen better days. A pair of shoes stepped up to the counter. Gary stared at them. They were sneakers. Rare ones. Vintage Nike prototypes, scuffed but unmistakably expensive. A memory flickered in the back of Gary's mind, a memory of a similar pair of shoes a year ago, in a lounge across the country. But he shook it off. Lots of kids wore expensive shoes. "Can I get a bottle of sparkling water and, let's see, the cinnamon sugar bites?" The voice. Gary froze. The rag in his hand stopped moving. That voice was come deep and possessed a specific cadence that haunted Gary's nightmares. It was the voice of the kid who had warned him. The voice of the kid who had told him exactly what would happen if he threw that bag. Slowly, terrifyingly, Gary lifted his head. Standing there was Vian Sterling. He looked different, yet exactly the same. He was taller now, filling out his frame. He wasn't wearing a hoodie this time. He was dressed in a sleek charcoal grey blazer over a black t-shirt, tailored chinos, and those signature sneakers. He looked like what he was, a young tech mogul. He wasn't traveling with an entourage, and he wasn't traveling with his father. He was alone, confident, and completely at ease. Gary felt the blood drain from his face. He wanted to run. He wanted to duck under the counter and hide amidst the boxes of frozen dough. But his legs wouldn't move. He was paralyzed by a cocktail of shame and fear. Vian was looking at the menu board, debating his sugar intake. He didn't seem to notice who was serving him. "Actually, scratch the sugar bites," Vian said, turning his gaze to the cashier. "Just the water. I have a long flight." Vian's eyes met Gary's. For a second, there was nothing. Just a customer looking at a service worker. And then recognition dawned. Vian's eyebrows lifted slightly. His gaze dropped to Gary's name tag. Gary. Trainee, and then back up to his face. He took in the hairnet, the grease stains on the uniform, the dark circles under Gary's eyes. The silence stretched for 5 seconds, but it felt like 5 years. Gary's heart hammered against his ribs. "Please don't say anything," he prayed. "Please don't make a scene. Please don't pull out a phone and film me. If he films me, I'll lose this job too." Gary opened his mouth, his voice trembling. Mr. Sterling." Vian didn't smile. He didn't smirk. There was no triumph in his eyes, no vindictive gleam. There was just a quiet, heavy sadness. He looked at Gary not as an enemy, but as a tragedy. "Hello, Gary," Vian said. The sound of his name shattered Gary's composure. He gripped the counter to stop his hands from shaking. I didn't know you were... I'm heading to Tokyo," Vian said conversationally, as if they were old acquaintances bumping into each other at a grocery store. business. That's good, Gary managed to choke out. That's good. How are you doing? Vian asked. The question hung in the air. How was he doing? He was ruined. He was humiliated. He was serving snacks to tourists while the kid he tried to destroy was flying private. He wanted to scream. He wanted to beg for forgiveness. He wanted to blame Patricia. But looking at Vian now, Gary realized he couldn't blame anyone but himself. I'm working, Gary whispered, looking down at the counter. Just working. Vian nodded slowly. He reached into his blazer pocket. Gary flinched instinctively, expecting a weapon or a lawsuit. But Vian just pulled out a wallet. A simple black leather wallet. The water is $4, Gary said quickly. But it's on the house. Please, just take it. Vian paused. He looked at the bottle of Pellegrino, then at Gary. No, Vian said firmly. I pay for what I use. I don't expect special treatment. Remember. The words hit Gary like a physical blow. I don't expect special treatment. It was the inverse of everything Gary had believed in the lounge. He had believed that status excused behavior, that wealth bought immunity. Vian was showing him the opposite integrity is paying $4 for water, even when you could buy the whole franchise. Vian pulled out a $20 bill. He placed it on the counter. Keep the change, Vian said. Gary stared at the bill. Mr. Sterling, I can't. Take it, Gary. Vian said, his voice dropping an octave, becoming serious. Buy yourself a coffee. You look tired. Vian grabbed the water. He turned to leave, but stopped. He looked back at the man who had once tried to have him arrested for sitting in a chair. You know, Vian said, Patricia is in a federal facility in Nevada. She writes me letters sometimes, asking for help. Gary's eyes widened. She does. Yeah, I don't answer them, Vian said. But you're out here. You're working. You have a chance to figure it out. Figure what out? Gary asked, tears stinging the corners of his eyes. That the uniform doesn't make the man, Vian said. And the hoodie doesn't make the thug. With that, Vian turned and walked away. He didn't look back. He moved through the crowd with the fluid grace of someone who belonged everywhere and nowhere. Gary stood there, the $20 bill resting on the sticky counter. He watched Vian disappear toward the security checkpoint for the VIP terminal. A line of people had formed behind Vian businessmen in suits, wealthy tourists. But Gary didn't see them. He only saw the ghost of his own prejudice walking away from him. He picked up the $20 bill. It was crisp, real. Hey, buddy. Are you open or what? A customer yelled from the back of the line. Gary blinked. He wiped his face with his sleeve. He took a deep breath, inhaling the scent of burnt sugar and floor wax. Yeah, Gary said, his voice stronger than it had been in a year. Yeah, I'm open. Vian cleared security in record time. The TSA agents recognized him. His face was practically part of their training manual now on profiling bias. They nodded respectfully as he passed. He walked toward the Diamond Elite Lounge. The entrance had been remodeled. The heavy steel glass doors that had trapped them that day were gone, replaced by smart glass panels that adjusted opacity based on the time of day. As he approached the desk, the new lounge manager, a sharp young woman named Sarah, stood up immediately. She beamed. Mr. Sterling, it is an honor to have you back. Thanks, Sarah, Vian said, scanning his digital pass. We have seat 1A reserved for you, of course, she said, tapping her screen. And the chef has prepared a fresh plate of those sliders you like. Is there anything else I can get you? Vian looked around the lounge. It was quiet. The jazz music was soft. The view of the tarmac was breathtaking. The sun setting over the bay, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple. It was the same room where he had been tackled, handcuffed, and humiliated. But the ghosts were gone. The energy had shifted. "No, Sarah," Vian said, hoisting his backpack onto his shoulder. A new backpack, reinforced with Kevlar, containing a server worth more than the plane he was about to board. Actually, he corrected himself. One thing. "Yes, sir. If you see a kid in here, maybe wearing a hoodie, maybe looking a little out of place, don't ask him for his ID." Vian said, a small smile playing on his lips. "Ask him if he wants a charger." Sarah smiled back, understanding the weight of the request. "Understood, Mr. Sterling." Vian walked to the back of the lounge to the quiet section. He sat in the leather recliner, seat 1A. He placed his backpack gently on the floor. He didn't throw it. He treated it with respect. He took a sip of the water Gary had sold him. It tasted like victory. Not the loud, shouting kind of victory, but the quiet, enduring kind. The kind that survives. He opened his laptop, the screen illuminating his face in the dim light. He typed a single line of code, executed the command, and watched the data stream flow green and steady. The world was noisy. People were quick to judge, quick to anger, and quick to destroy. But as the engines of his jet began to spool up outside the window, Vian closed his eyes and found his silence. He had kept the plane in the air. This story is a powerful reminder that prejudice isn't just morally wrong, it's dangerous. Patricia and Gary were so blinded by their own bias that they couldn't see the truth standing right in front of them, that a young black man in a hoodie could be the most important person in the room. They judged the book by its cover, and they paid the ultimate price for it. If you enjoyed this story and want to see more real-life karma hitting back, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a story. And let me know in the comments. If you were Vian, would you have forgiven Gary at the end, or would you have walked right past him? I'll see you in the next video.